Imagine a king, okay, at the the peak of his power. A military genius. He's conquered a rival nation, married its princess. It looks like his dynasty is secure for generations.
Sounds like the perfect setup.
Right. Now imagine just months later, he's dead, gone, and his infant son is on the throne. And that single event kicks off a century of, well, unprecedented chaos, royal collapse. How does something like that even happen?
It's quite the domino effect.
It really is. What I find mind-boggling is just how fast that seemingly invincible dynasty just unraveled. An infant on the throne. It's almost hard to grasp.
Oh, yeah.
And that exact scenario is what we're diving into today. We're drawing heavily from Dan Jones's fantastic book, The Hollow Crown, The Wars of the Roses and the Rise of the Tudors.
Ah, yes, Jones. A brilliant historian.
Absolutely. He specializes in medieval European history. You might know his bestseller, The Plantagenets. People called it a real version of Game of Thrones.
High praise, but deserved.
Totally. And The Hollow Crown, the book we're focusing on, is essentially its sequel, just as gripping.
Right. So our mission today, really, is to unpack the core insights from the book. Jones meticulously details this incredibly turbulent century in England.
Whole century.
Yeah, from the decline of the House of Lancaster, right through to the Tudors, finally getting a firm grip on power.
So the book really tackles those big questions.
Exactly. Like, what actually led to the fall of Lancaster? What was that turmoil like for England? And crucially, how did all that chaos eventually end? It digs into all of that.
Okay, so to help us, and you listening, navigate the century of upheaval, we've kind of structured our deep dive in 3 main parts. It mirrors how Jones lays it out in the book.
Makes sense.
First, we'll look at the fall of the House of Lancaster, focusing quite a bit on Henry VI. Poor guy.
He definitely drew a short straw.
Then we'll get into the outbreak and the brutal reality of the Wars of the Roses.
A messy, messy period.
And finally, we'll track the rise of the Tudor dynasty, how they finally brought some stability.
Okay, let's do it. So maybe we start with a moment that should have been a high point. June 1420, King Henry V of Lancaster, England, marries Catherine de Valois, daughter of the French king, Charles VI.
This wasn't just any royal wedding, though.
Not at all. This basically made English control over France official. Henry V, remember, was this military powerhouse. He won the war partly because France's king, Charles VI, suffered from severe mental illness, and France itself was pretty divided internally.
He really capitalized on their weakness.
He did. But then, like you said, this astonishingly swift turn. Just 2 years later, 1422, Henry V dies. Dysentery, of all things.
Awful. And he never even saw his son, Henry VI, who was just an infant.
Never saw him.
So, what were the immediate effects? Beyond the obvious shock and the power vacuum, how did this death really open, as Jones puts it, Pandora's box?
Well, Jones makes a really strong point here. Henry V did try to plan for succession. He named his oldest brother, John, Duke of Bedford, to handle France. His youngest brother, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, and the Duke of Exeter, were tasked with caring for the baby Henry VI back in England.
So there was some structure in place.
There was. But despite those efforts, Jones argues, and I think he's right, no detailed preparations could alleviate the uneasiness of putting a baby on the throne. It just instantly destabilized things.
Yeah, you can imagine the whispers starting immediately.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about the baby king. It shook a monarchy that, let's be honest, already had a bit of a shaky foundation. Remember how the Lancasters got the throne in the first place?
Oh, right. Good point. That historical context is key. Henry V's father, Henry IV, he basically took the throne from Richard II back in 1399.
He did. He usurped him, violated the whole lineage inheritance system.
So that history, that sort of questioned legitimacy, it set a dangerous precedent, didn't it? Like an invitation for future challenges.
Precisely. So you've got this baby king, a family claim that's already a bit dodgy. What do you do? Well, the aristocracy and parliament, they tried to manage things through a collective council.
A council to rule for the baby.
Sort of. The idea was to prevent any one person grabbing too much power. So everything, absolutely everything, required Henry VI's official seal. His stamp.
A baby's stamp controlling the fate of the nation? That sounds absurd.
It does sound absurd, but as Jones points out, this model of acting rule, while seemingly absurd, did largely preserve the dynasty's stability. For a while, anyway. It forced them to act together, present a united front.
Okay, so it worked initially, but that stability clearly didn't last. What happened when Henry VI actually grew up and tried to rule himself?
Well, that's when things really started to go south. Fast. Remember England's control over France? That started slipping badly after the Duke of Bedford died in 1435. Charles VII of France started clawing back territory.
And Henry VI just wasn't his father, was he? Militarily or politically?
Not even close. He seems to have had almost zero political talent. And his decisions, they were incredibly costly. Jones gives examples like Henry just signing off on pardons or petitions that drained the royal coffers, like 2,000 marks one day, another Generalsmark grant the next day.
Wow. Just giving money away. Did he not understand the value, or?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe he saw it as his personal money pot, or maybe he just couldn't grasp the scale of it all. Either way, for a king, it's a pretty terrifying level of financial incompetence.
And his diplomacy wasn't much better, I gather.
Oh, equally disastrous. The big one was his marriage to Margaret of Anjou in 1445. As part of that deal, England basically gave away Maine to her father.
Gave away territory, just like that.
Just like that. And the English nobles were furious. They saw it as humiliating and disastrous. It made England look weak on the international stage.
So it sounds like Henry VI himself was a major part of the problem, not just the situation he inherited.
Jones really emphasizes this. Henry's personal failings, combined with a system, the common law system, that couldn't easily remove a monarch, even one who was clearly unfit. It was like a slow-burning fuse.
A system that couldn't adapt.
Exactly. It wasn't just simple incompetence, it was this deep systemic vulnerability. And that directly fueled the public anger, the accusations of traitors, and eventually outright rebellion, like Cade's.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Could any kingdom, no matter how strong it seems, survive that kind of sustained leadership vacuum at the very top?
It's a huge question. Were there other pressures? Sure. The 100 Years' War winding down caused its own issues. Internal factions always existed, but Jones really pins the internal decay on Henry's failings, igniting those existing tensions.
So that disastrous deal over Maine, ceding territory, that really fanned the flames back home.
Big time. Public discontent just grew and grew. People started muttering about traitors surrounding the king. And then in 1449, France broke an armistice, captured Normandy. That was the breaking point.
And that leads to Cade's rebellion.
Yes. In Kent, Cade wasn't trying to overthrow the king initially, more like remove the treacherous officials he thought were misleading Henry. But Henry VI tried to suppress it and failed miserably.
His own officers turned on him.
Some did, yeah. They started demanding the traitors be dealt with, even threatening to switch sides. Henry arrested one unpopular baron, but it wasn't nearly enough. He actually ended up fleeing London.
Fleeing his own capital.
Wow, yeah. Cade's rebels marched in, captured London, even started slaughtering prisoners they deemed traitors. It got very ugly. Eventually, the mayor managed to regain control and Cade was captured, but that deep restlessness, it didn't go away.
And wasn't there someone else waiting in the wings? Richard, Duke of York?
Yes. The Duke of York. He was Lieutenant of Ireland at the time, and a lot of the rebels and the general public really saw him as the potential savior, the one who could restore order and competence.
So he came back?
He did, but crucially, without Henry VI's permission. He hoped to help, maybe steer things right. The public welcomed him, but the king and his court, they were deeply suspicious. Saw him almost as part of the problem, maybe even backing the rebels.
So even though he might have wanted to help, he was sidelined.
Pretty much. Despite his influence and popularity, he was ultimately powerless to stop the Lancaster dynasty from crumbling further.
Which brings us back to Jones's core argument, doesn't it?
It really does. That the fundamental issue was the British system of royal succession, which often ran the risk of putting unqualified leaders on the throne. No matter how many talented people were around, they wouldn't ditch the system. And that refusal, that rigidity, led straight to public discord and the dynasty's end.
It shows how sometimes the biggest threat isn't an outside enemy,
but the flaws baked into your own system.
Exactly.
Okay, so the Lancaster dynasty is visibly falling apart. And you mentioned 1453 as this really critical turning point. What happened then? Two massive things happened in 1453, both with huge consequences. First, remember Henry V's widow, Queen Catherine. After Henry died, she'd remarried, secretly at first, to a Welsh guard named Owen Tudor.
Owen Tudor. The name sounds familiar.
It should. They had two sons. Now, these Tudor boys were initially kept quiet, even hunted for a time. But in 1453, Parliament officially recognized them, declared them legitimate half-brothers of King Henry VI. That gave them noble status, titles, and crucially, rights to potentially inherit the throne down the line.
So the Tudors officially entered the picture. What was the second big event?
The second event involved Henry VI himself. He completely succumbed to mental illness, the same kind, it seems, that afflicted his French grandfather, Charles VI. He became totally incapacitated, catatonic, basically.
Just gone, mentally.
Completely vacant. Now, ironically, around the same time, Queen Margaret finally gave birth to a son, Prince Edward, so there was an heir. But the king's breakdown created this massive power vacuum, and all those simmering conflicts between the powerful nobles, they just exploded into open bloodshed.
So who took charge?
Well, with the king incapacitated, the kingdom was unstable. Things got so bad that the nobles, even those who previously distrusted the Duke of York, were forced to appoint him protector of the realm, just to try and restore some kind of order.
The Duke of York finally gets his chance, but under the worst circumstances.
Exactly. And it's out of this chaos that we really see the three main players emerge for the conflict that followed. Historians later called it the Wars of the Roses.
Right, the three houses.
You had the House of Tudor, now legitimized. You had the House of Lancaster, effectively led by the determined Queen Margaret fighting for her son's rights. And you had the House of York, led by Richard, Duke of York, now protector.
And the name, Wars of the Roses,
comes from their symbols. All three houses used roses in their emblems. Lancaster red, York white. It's quite evocative, isn't it?
It really is. So this first stage of the conflict, it's mainly Lancaster versus York, triggered by Henry's illness and York becoming protector.
That's the initial spark, yes. The fight for control during the king's incapacity. But it spiraled into decades of brutal conflict.
Decades. And Jones covers this period in detail, I assume, the back and forth.
Oh, absolutely. The book dives deep into the fighting, the key figures. People like Warbeck the Kingmaker, whose support could literally make or break a king. The crown changes hands multiple times. Battles like Towton, incredibly bloody, one of the worst ever fought on English soil. It reshaped everything.
It really highlights what happens when central authority just collapses, that power vacuum.
It doesn't just invite conflict. It turns the whole country into a brutal chessboard, as Jones illustrates so well.
Okay, so fast forward through those brutal decades. The Wars of the Roses eventually end, but you said that didn't mean instant peace.
Not at all. Henry Tudor emerges victorious, defeats Richard III at Bosworth Field, and is crowned Henry VII on October 30th, 1485. But winning the crown and keeping it are two different things.
He still had rivals to deal with.
Exactly. He needed to eliminate all the potential contenders to really secure his rule and his new Tudor dynasty. And Jones points out the symbolism right away. Henry VIII's new seal, covered with red roses for Lancaster, but also golden dragon claws, a Welsh symbol nodding to his Tudor heritage. The red rose really becomes the Tudor symbol.
Interesting symbolism. But symbols aren't enough, right? What practical steps did he take?
A really crucial one, politically brilliant actually, was his marriage. Remember, Henry wasn't full-blooded Lancasters. His claim was a bit thin in some eyes. So he married Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of the former Yorkist King Edward IV.
Uniting the houses.
Precisely. This was key to getting the Yorkist factions on board, or at least neutralizing them. And this union created the famous Tudor rose, that blend of the red Lancaster rose and the white York rose.
Ah, the Tudor rose.
I've seen that.
It's powerful symbolism. It signaled the end of the feud, the restoration of alliance, the formal arrival of this new Tudor dynasty. A masterstroke of political branding, really. But even with a united symbol, the threats went over. People still challenged him.
Oh yes, almost immediately. In 1487, this 10-year-old boy, Lambert Simnel, pops up in Ireland. He's coached to claim he's the Earl of Warbeck, son of George Rourke, Duke of Clarence Edward V, brother basically, a Yorkist heir.
A child pretender. Who was backing him?
Old factions loyal to Richard III, plus Margaret of Burgundy. She was Edward V and Richard III's sister, living overseas, and a real thorn in Henry's side.
So how did Henry II handle that?
Swiftly and decisively. First, he took the real Earl of Warwick, George's actual son, out of the tower where he was being held and literally paraded him through London, just to show everyone Simnel was a fake.
Smart move, publicly debunking the claim.
Very. And at the same time, he cracked down hard on any Yorkists he didn't trust, stripped them of titles, lands, influence. Then, when Simnel and his backers, including mercenaries and Irish farmers, actually invaded England a few months later, Henry VII met them head-on near Newark.
Another battle.
A decisive one. Jones describes the royal army's archers unleashing fierce volleys of arrows. The rebels, mostly unarmored, were just mown down. Simnel was captured. Henry, interestingly, didn't execute him. He put him to work in the royal kitchens.
From pretender king to kitchen boy, that's quite a statement.
Sends a message, doesn't it? Contemptuous almost. But the threat wasn't entirely gone. Just as Henry might have breathed a sigh of relief, another claimant appeared.
Not another one. Who was it this time?
A young man named Perkin Warbeck, a merchant, apparently from Tournai, but he claimed to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the princes in the Tower, Edward V's son, who had disappeared under Richard III.
Ah, one of the missing princes. That's a potentially powerful claim.
Very powerful. And Warbeck got significant backing. The former mayor of Cork in Ireland supported him. King Charles VIII of France saw him as a useful pawn to stir up trouble for Henry. Margaret of Burgundy backed him enthusiastically, of course. Even the Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Scotland lent support at various times.
So this was a more serious, internationally backed threat.
For a while, yes. But Henry VII stuck to his hardline approach. He used military pressure, diplomatic maneuvering. He even launched a brief invasion of France, partly to force Charles VIII to drop his support for Warbeck.
He attacked France over this?
Shows how seriously he took it. Eventually, Warbeck's support network crumbled. His invasions failed. He was finally captured in 1497 and imprisoned. Initially treated leniently, like Simnel, but after an escape attempt, he was executed in 1499. Simnel, interestingly, was implicated in the plot and confined more securely.
So Henry VII crushed both pretenders. That must have solidified his rule considerably.
It did. It showed his political skill, his ruthlessness when needed, and it effectively shut down major foreign meddling through these claimants. He proved the Tudor dynasty was here to stay.
Okay, so the pretenders are dealt with. What else did Henry do to secure the dynasty long-term? He arranged strategic marriages, right?
Yes, absolutely, trying to build alliances and secure the succession. He arranged for his eldest son, Arthur, to marry Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess, a huge diplomatic coup. And his daughter Margaret married James V, the King of Scotland, trying to tie up all the loose ends.
Sounds like sensible planning, but then tragedy.
But tragedy struck hard. First, Prince Arthur, the heir, died suddenly just months after his wedding in 1502. A huge blow. Then the following year, Queen Elizabeth, Henry's wife, died in childbirth, trying to provide another male heir.
Oh no. First his heir, then his queen. That must have been devastating. And politically destabilizing.
Personally devastating, certainly. And politically worrying. Henry VIII himself became much more suspicious, perhaps even paranoid, after these losses. His focus turned towards the last remaining family with a plausible, if distant, Yorkist claim, the de la Poles.
The de la Poles, who were they again?
They were descended from Edward V's sister. The main figures were Edmund de la Pole, the Earl of Suffolk, and his brother Richard.
And Henry saw them as a threat.
Increasingly so. Edmund de la Pole, perhaps sensing this shift in the wind or genuinely plotting, fled England and started openly opposing Henry VII from abroad.
Another exile causing trouble.
Exactly. Henry reacted with characteristic ruthlessness. He imprisoned de la Pole family members still in England, cracked down hard on anyone suspected of supporting them. He put diplomatic pressure on European rulers not to shelter Edmund.
Did it work?
Eventually, yes. European powers didn't want to cross the now powerful Henry VII. Edmund was eventually handed over, brought back to England, and locked in the Tower of London. His brother Richard remained abroad, potential figurehead, but died fighting in the Battle of Pavia years later.
And Edmund in the Tower.
He stayed there for the rest of Henry VII's reign. He was actually executed later by Henry VIII. But with the de la Poles effectively neutralized, imprisoned, exiled, or dead, and other potential claimants dealt with, the Tudor throne was finally secure.
It really sounds like Henry VII had to be utterly ruthless to make that happen.
He did. Jones portrays him as methodical, patient, but absolutely iron-willed when it came to eliminating threats. It was that combination that finally, after nearly a century of chaos, ushered in what Jones calls a lasting and harmonious stage of development for the Tudor dynasty. It's a stark lesson. Establishing new power often involves brutally clearing away the old.
So let's just quickly recap the whole sweep Jones covers in the book. It starts with royal authority just collapsing under Henry VI, England losing its grip on France.
Even though many capable people tried to prop Henry VI up, the system itself, the common law, couldn't deal with an unfit king.
Right. Then the Wars of the Roses erupt. Yorkists replace Lancasters. Edward I comes in, tries to rebuild, but his attempts to manage factions actually lead to more civil war.
Then the shocker. Richard III usurps the throne from his own nephew, Edward V's son. That triggers the Tudor Rebellion.
And Henry Tudor wins, becomes Henry VII, and crucially marries Edward V's daughter, Elizabeth of York.
Finally uniting those warring families, Lancaster and York, symbolized by that Tudor rose. And that finally puts an end to this century of incredible turmoil.
What a century. So, stepping back from the details, What does this whole saga as told in the book really mean for us looking back now?
Well, I think Jones masterfully shows us the cyclical nature of power, how fragile even seemingly strong regimes can be, and the absolutely massive impact leadership, both good and bad, strong and weak, has on a nation's fate.
It wasn't just about battles and kings, was it? It was about the desperate search for legitimacy, for stability.
Absolutely. That quest drove everything. It shows how a system, in this case the monarchy and its succession rules, can be its own worst enemy if it can't adapt. How internal divisions, leadership vacuums, how they can tear a kingdom apart just as effectively as any foreign invasion. The Hollow Crown isn't just medieval history. It feels like a timeless story about power itself, how it's won, lost, and sometimes painstakingly rebuilt.
So, a final thought for you listening. When you look at this incredible century, all the betrayal, the ambition, the constantly shifting loyalties that Jones describes, what parallels jump out at you? Do you see echoes of these struggles for power, maybe in different forms elsewhere in history, or even in the world today? What, for you, is the ultimate lesson we can take away from this deep dive into the Hollow Crown?